Psycholinguistics. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss together the title or the topic for today's lecture is Methods of Psycholinguistic Research. And this is the first of a two series of lecture. So this is the first lecture we have for Methods of Psycholinguistic Research. We have another lecture, which is the third lecture, which is going to be right after this lecture, which is about the same topic, Methods of Psycholinguistic Research. So by this topic, we mean how do researchers in psycholinguistics conduct research. So for those who are doing research on any field of psycholinguistics, how do they conduct the research? What are the challenges that face them? Okay, now let's move to the first slide we have, which is the contents. So in today's lecture, we are going to discuss some important facts. The first fact we have is language processing is subconscious. So this is the first fact we have for today. Language processing is subconscious. It is a process which is inside the mind. What does this mean? What are the implications for this? We're going to see this in the next few slides. The second fact we have for today is often language processing is not observed physically. Again, you may ask at this point, what does this mean? What are the implications for this fact? We are going to discuss this in detail in the next few slides. The next thing we have for today is how to analyze language processing. Okay? How to analyze language processing. So if we say that language processing is not observed physically, you cannot see how language is processed inside the human brain, then how do psycholinguists analyze language processing? How do they study language processing if it is mind internal? We are going to see one of the widely common methods, which is slips of the tongue, and in the next lecture, lecture number 3, we're going to see or we're going to discuss another method. So for today we're just going to discuss slips of the tongue. Okay? Now let's discuss the first important fact we have for today, which is language processing. That is, whenever we say language processing, this is very important, you have to remember this. This is very important. Whenever we say language processing, what do we mean by language processing? Whenever we say language processing, we mean both language production, that is speaking and writing. This is called language production. Or language perception, that is receiving the language. You receive language in two ways, either by listening or reading. So language processing, which is both production, speaking and writing, and perception, which is listening and reading, is subconscious. What do we mean by subconscious? It is done without thinking. So while you are listening to me now, you are not thinking how to understand the sentence. You just understand it. It is subconscious. You do not plan how to understand it. You do not. You cannot even plan the steps for understanding. It is subconscious. And again, this is a grace that every one of us should be thankful to Allah for it, because you do not need to think how to understand in order to understand. Whenever you listen to someone, whenever you speak, you just speak. You do not find it difficult to plan speaking. You just speak. You do not find it difficult to plan listening. You're just, while you are listening, the mind works without any interruption from your side. I'm going to repeat this because it is important. It explains what do we mean by language is subconscious. While you are listening to me now, your brain works independently. Okay? Your mind works independently in order to analyze the language you are listening to. While speaking, your mind, your brain works independently. You don't have to think. While listening, you don't have to think. You don't have to plan the process of understanding the message. Understanding the message is a process which is done without your intervention. It is done in a subconscious level. And here we have an example for this, just to illustrate how language processing is subconscious. When reading an English text, do your eyes move continuously or move with slight pauses? So while you are reading a text, of course, when reading an English text, your eyes move from left to right. So I'm asking this question, try to answer it. Do my eyes move continuously without any pauses? Or do they move, pause, then pause, then move, then pause? So it is either of the two. Either your eyes move continuously, or they move and keep pausing. It is a fact that has been proven in psycholinguistics that while reading, your eyes do not move smoothly from left to right. They do not move smoothly from left to right. Although some of you might think that my eyes move smoothly, but in fact there are slight pauses. If you were unaware of this fact, which is expected, if you were unaware of this fact, this is because language processing is subconscious. Okay? You don't have to plan your eye movements. You don't have to tell your eyes to stop and then move to stop. This is done subconsciously. Okay? This is done without even thinking of this process. You don't have to plan your poses while reading. So while reading an English text, or perhaps an Arabic text, which is a bit more obvious to you, because when reading an Arabic text, it is easy for you to keep moving. So you don't tell your eyes, okay, stop here, then move, stop here, so that I understand. Your mind works without your intervention. So while reading, your eyes do not move smoothly from left to right. If you were unaware of this fact, I'm sure every one of you does this. I'm sure every one of you keeps pausing while reading. If you are unaware of this fact, this is because language processing is subconscious. Okay, it is a process which is inside the mind. The mind works without your own intervention. Okay, so this is the first fact, which is language processing, that is, language production and language perception, is subconscious. It is a process which is inside the mind. The mind works without your own intervention. Okay, now let's move to the second fact we have. Since language processing is mind internal, since language processing is inside the mind, it is mostly not physically observable. Okay, so since language production and language perception, since speaking, reading, writing, and since listening, reading, speaking, and writing are processes which are done inside the mind, it is mostly not physically observable. What do we mean by this? If you opened someone's brain, I know this sounds harsh, but let's just suppose that you had the chance of looking at inside someone's brain. Are you going to see letters, phrases, words? Of course not. So this is not the case. When you open someone's skull, that is the head, and looked at inside the brain, you brought a microscope and looked at the brain, you had a close look at the brain. Of course you are not going to see letters, You're not going to see the letter A, for example. You're not going to see the letter H. You're not going to see the letter C. What you're going to see is just the organ, the brain itself. You're not going to see words. You're not going to see, for example, the word computer. You're not going to see the word mouse. You're not going to see the word keyboard inside your brain. So language is not physically observable. You cannot see it. It's a process which is unseen. You cannot see it. You cannot see how does the brain work while producing language. You cannot see how does the brain works. How does the brain work while listening to language. It's a process which is inside the brain. Okay, so this is not the case. Of course, if you opened someone's skull and looked at what is inside his brain, you're not going to see letters, you're not going to see words, and you're not going to see phrases. What you are going to see is just the organ, the brain. Okay? So, for example, we cannot see how does the mind combine words to produce sentences. If you had an MRI or a brain imaging surgery or a brain imaging operation and tried to look at the brain while someone is speaking, are you going to see how does the brain bring one word and links it to the other? How does the brain brings one phrase and links it to the other? Of course, you are not going to see this. No way. There's no way of seeing how does the brain from inside brings one word and link it to the other word. Of course, you cannot see it. It's a process which is hidden, which is unseen. We cannot see how does the mind, how does the brain combine words to produce sentences. So, of course, science is developing, but until today, we cannot see this process. It is a process inside the mind, inside the brain. We cannot see it. So this is the bad side. The good side is we have ways of overcoming this predicament, overcoming this difficulty. To overcome this predicament or this difficulty, that is hidden language processing, psycholinguists guess the hidden mental process by analyzing the observable behavior. Okay, I'm going to explain what does this mean. Of course, it's a difficulty that we cannot see language production. If we had a look inside the brain, we cannot see words. We cannot see how does the brain create language. We cannot see how does the brain create sentences. This is a difficulty. To overcome this difficulty, psycholinguists guess the hidden mental process that is linking words together, linking phrases together in order to create language. Psycholinguists guess the hidden mental process by analyzing the observable behavior. In the next few slides, we're going to see what does the phrase observable behavior mean. Okay, how to observe hidden linguistic processes. This is a very important question. If language processing is hidden to us, is unseen to us, then how are you going to study language processing? How are we going to study it? One way to study language processing is by studying slips of the tongue. So, are morphemes organized inside the brain just like words, or are they organized differently? Well, of course, we can study how does language processing takes place by doing vocabulary experiments. One example of vocabulary experiments is lexical decision and the priming paradigm. We can also do timed reading experiments. We can also do event-related potentials. In this course, we are going to see just two of these. You don't have to worry about timed reading experiments. There's no need to study it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about event-related potentials. What you have to study in your exam is the first two: slips of the tongue, vocabulary experiments. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss slips of the tongue, and in lecture number 3, the next lecture, we are going to discuss vocabulary experiments. So let's start with the first way of observing language processing, which is mind internal. We have something called slips of the tongue. What does it mean? And of course we have something which is similar to it, which is called spoonerisms. So slips of the tongue involve exchanging morphemes within a sentence. We're going to see how does this look like. We're going to see how does this look like in a minute. So slips of the tongue involve exchanging morphemes within a sentence. So in sentences, you have morphemes. You know the meaning of morpheme. It is the smallest meaningful component of language. For example, the word camera. The word camera is a morpheme. The word, or if we said understand, this is a morpheme. Understandable, it is two morphemes. Understand and able. Understandable, two morphemes. Okay? If you don't know the meaning of morpheme, then please go back and read what does it mean, so that you understand what we are saying now. So slips of the tongue involve exchanging morphemes within a sentence. How does this look like? Of course it looks funny when someone had a slip of a tongue. So let's suppose that someone intended to say bad salad. So he is eating salad, a dish of salad, and he is not satisfied with its quality, and he says this salad is bad. So he intended to say, the speaker intended to say bad salad, but instead of saying bad salad, he said sad ballad. So this is a slip of a tongue. How does this help us in understanding language processing? We're going to see this in a minute. Another example of a slip of a tongue is I had forgotten about that. So the speaker intended to say I had forgotten about that. Instead of saying it, he said I had forgot about that. I had forgotten about that. So we have a difference between the intended speech and the produced speech. A third example is easily enough. The speaker intended to say, wanted to say, easily enough. Instead of saying easily enough, the speaker said, easy enoughly. Okay, which is a slip of a tongue. Alright? Of course, these slips of the tongue are not just random, useless mistakes. We can learn from these mistakes. What you are concerned about now, as someone who's studying psycholinguistics, is how do spoonerisms, how do slips of the tongue help me as a researcher in psycholinguistics. These slips of the tongue, these spoonerisms, are not just random, useless mistakes. They tell us a lot about how language is processed in the brain. Okay? How language is processed inside the brain. These mistakes, which you may think by the first look as silly, as funny, as humorous, they look funny, they look humorous. You may laugh when you read them. However, they are useful to us. We can learn from them. Alright? How can we learn from these slips of the tongue? Of course, we can learn from these slips of the tongue. So we can ask this question. So what do slips of the tongue tell us about the brain and language processing? What do they tell us? So it's a phenomenon of language. Almost in every language we have slips of the tongue. In Arabic, I'm sure this has happened to you before. I'm sure this has happened to you, which is slip of a tongue. This happens even in your first language, slip of a tongue. So what does this tell us? Slips of the tongue tell us, as linguists, two important facts. The first is that we plan our speech before uttering it. If you look at the example below, we have an intended speech and we have a produced speech. Rules of word formation. This is the intended. The produced is words of word formation. Okay? This tells us a very important fact, that before we speak, we plan. How? Because I'm not sure whether you can see the cursor or not, but here we have in the produced speech words of rule formation. It is produced wrongly, not because it is just a random mistake. Here we have the plural s in words of rule formation. It is because, why does the speaker has this plural s? It is because he intended to say rules, but rather said words. So this tells us that before we speak, we prepare, we plan. Of course, this does not take a long time to prepare our speech. It doesn't take a very long time. It might take a split of a second to plan speaking a sentence. So how does the slips of the tongue tell us that we plan our speech before speaking? It is by looking at such examples. Here in the example we have words of rule formation. This plural s occurred because the speaker has planned to say rules. So in the planned, which is inside the mind, which we cannot see, in the planned sentence, in the processed sentence, we have a plural s. But in the produced speech, which we can observe, which we can read, we have an s which came in the wrong place. Instead of rules of word formation, the plural s came in the wrong place, words of rule formation. So this is a fact, or this is an indication that language processing, or that planning or planning happens in the language processing. So while we are processing the language, we are planning. Okay, so this is the first thing that slips of the tongue tell us. The second thing is that morphemes, here we have two morphemes in the word rules. The first one is rule. The second morpheme is the plural s, rules of word formation. So in the word rules, we have two morphemes. The first is rule, the second is the plural s. So morphemes function independently from words. How do the slips of the tongue tell us that they function differently? We can tell this by looking at the produced speech, which is observable. The words of rule formation, or the produced word is the produced sentence, or the produced utterance is words of rule formation. Here we have the plural S, which has appeared in the wrong place. Again, I'm going to repeat this. Morphemes function independently from words. So here we have two morphemes within one word, which is rules. So in this word, rules, we have two morphemes. The first is rule, the second is the plural S, which is in blue font. So the first morpheme is in green, the second is in blue. In the produced sentence, which we can see, we can read, we can observe, we see that the two morphemes, which is inside the human mind, these should be linked together, the two morphemes, word and S, rule and S, rules. Inside the mind, they should be in one entity, they should be in one word, rules. However, in the produced speech, which we can see, they have appeared in two separate words, two separate words. Words, so this is the plural S has appeared in a separate word, which is words of rule formation. So inside the brain, they are linked, and in the production, they are split. What can this tell us? They tell us that this can tell us that morphemes function independently from words during sentence planning. So while you are speaking, you are planning something. You are planning your sentence, your utterance. While planning, your brain, your mind works like this. It brings one morpheme and links it to the other. How did we tell this? It is by looking at the slip of the tongue. In the slip of the tongue, we had them split. We had them in two separate places. This tells us that inside the brain, they have been brought together. They are in two separate places, but they have been brought together. The brain looks at morphemes as separate entities, not as words, not as one entity. Okay? I know I have explained this so much, and sometimes when you explain something, in Arabic we say كثرة الكلام يذهب بعضه بعضا. So I've explained this a lot. Perhaps you might find it difficult to follow. So I will summarize this in one sentence. Inside your brain, morphemes are recognized as different entities. For example, rule and S are recognized by your brain as different entities. While you speak, your brain brings things together, your brain links things together, and links the word rule to the plural S. I hope this is clear. If not, you can contact me. You can ask me to clarify more using the email which is provided in the first slide of this presentation, or this lecture. So we are done for today's lecture. In the next lecture, we're going to see, we're going to discuss the second process, the second experiment, or the second way for observing language processing, which is vocabulary experiments. So that's it for today. Please, if you have any questions, keep asking me, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions and your clarifications. Thank you very much.